Hello, everyone, and welcome to our online lecture for the class. If you were not in class today, we had a little situation where we had a fire drill. I don't know if it was a drill or not, but class, we all had to leave the building and we didn't know when we'd get back in. So I decided to just make an online lecture for this material. Important to remember this material will be on the test. So probably important that you listen to this lecture. I will try to make it as quick as possible, even though there are a lot of slides. We'll do some announcements. We'll probably skip current events since you can't interact with me. And then I'll just do the lecture and there will be no ICA for today. Those who are in class signed an attendance sheet. So as I mentioned, we do need some more volunteers for the Dr. Bob run on Sunday morning. If anyone's interested, shoot me an email. We will have 3 different company or organizations come speak to us in the next few, the next 8 weeks of the class. There's actually 5 total people coming from 3 organizations. So I can have up to 5 volunteers who will introduce these guest speakers. It's worth 5 points extra credit. Basically, if you've been in one of Dr. Kish's classes, he has the students introduce the guest speaker. I think it makes them feel very nice and welcome to class, and it's a good chance for you to earn some extra points if you are in need. And then finally, so you know kind of what's going on with our schedule, next week on Tuesday, we're going to have our review for the exam. And on Thursday, we will have exam 1. Hoping to have your study guide posted by Sunday. I still need to write the exam, but that's kind of the first thing on my to-do list this weekend. So as soon as it's written, I will post a study guide. And just in case you aren't completely sure what's going to be on the exam in terms of broad content sense, anything we've covered in the course from week 1 to 8 will be discussed. So I'm going to skip over current events here, and we're going to jump right into the lecture. So we are going to talk about sales and service this week. Some of this stuff is pretty self-explanatory in terms of, obvious what are sales, what makes a good salesperson, so forth. But we're really going to try to get into some of the terminology that I think will be super helpful as you prepare for your exam. So most importantly, sales is the lifeblood of any sport organization. Hang on, I want to make sure I'm recording. Yes, okay, good. Sales is the lifeblood of any sport organization. Without sales, an organization can't really survive unless it's a nonprofit. So what is exactly sellable when we're talking about sports? A lot of times if you're selling a product, you can typically only sell, you're trying to sell the product. You're trying to sell a certain kind of clothing. You're trying to sell a certain kind of shoe. Well, sports is a little bit different. We have a lot of different areas where we can sell. We can sell tickets. We can sell media rights. And then the other options that you see there on the list. So a large variety of options that can be sold when we're talking about sports, not just tickets. In addition, sales is the revenue producing element of the marketing process. Obviously, if you're trying to produce revenue in an event, sales is probably the most important way you're going to do that. A definition for selling, a very dictionary definition, is the process of moving goods and services from the hands of those who produce them into the hands of those who will benefit from their use. So essentially, it's the process of moving goods and services from one place to another. Now, if you've ever been involved in selling yourself, you know that it involves a lot of persuasive skills. You cannot simply sell something without trying to persuade the buyer to purchase it. I don't know if any of you have participated in selling in your current job, maybe as a volunteer for an organization, maybe as when you were younger and your school was having a certain kind of bake sale or magazine sale you might have sold, maybe to your neighbors, to your family members. You do have to be persuasive. There's also a bit of a process that selling goes through. First, you need to identify your customers, know who you're selling to, and you need to get through to them in order for them to want to buy. The way you can do this is by increasing their awareness and interest in your product or service. And then finally, you have to persuade them to act on that interest. So now that we've kind of talked or defined what sales is, which again, quite an obvious term that many of us are hopefully familiar with, but now we need to talk about what makes a good salesperson. Again, when you're listening to this lecture, I want you to think about a time when you've been asked to sell a product. First of all, you yourself have to believe in the product. If you're selling for something that you don't believe in or you really don't care about, you're not going to be very persuasive. You also have to believe in yourself. You need to have confidence to kind of sell the product. And it takes a lot of seeing many people. If you just go to 2 or 3 people, the odds are you're not going to sell very much of what you're selling. Timing is super important. If you're trying to sell something over the phone, let's say you're a sort of telemarketer, and you call at 2 p.m. in the afternoon to a home phone number, odds are people might not be home because that's during the work hours, right? So you need to call. Most of us get our telemarketing calls during dinner hours because telemarketers know that families are are eating and they might be home to answer the phone. Ultimately, you need to listen to the customer. You need to realize, though, that what the customer wants might not be what they're telling you. And I think a lot of us can relate to this when we've had a salesman come or saleswoman come to our door, or someone trying to persuade us to join something or buy something or become a member of something. We might not be 100% honest with them, right? We might be like, oh, I'm busy. I got to go run an errand. Sorry, I can't talk to you right now. So you have to listen to the customer, but understand they might not be being honest. It's important to have a good sense of humor because you can't take yourself too seriously. You're probably going to have a lot of situations where you might not sell something, you might not be treated as well, etc. It's important to knock on old doors. Now, of course, this doesn't mean knocking on old doors that have been around for 100 years or the doors of the elderly. It means knocking on doors that you've knocked on before. You might have to go back. You might have to try again. You have to be willing to ask everyone to buy. You can't just say, oh, I don't think they would want to. You need to ask everyone. You need to be aggressive throughout the same time, even or throughout the entire time, even after you get the sale. You can't just be like, all right, thanks, bye. You have to continue that aggressiveness and enthusiasm. And then, as with many things, you need common sense. So when we're talking about sales inventory, kind of touched on this earlier, but sales inventory refers to the products and services that the sales staff can market, promote, package, and sell through the sales methods we're going to discuss. Again, in sports, for sport organizations, your sales inventory is not simply tickets. It's made up of media rights. It's made up of signage. It's made up of, I think, maybe it's my next slide. Yes, my next slide here. You can see all these different areas in sport where you essentially have something to sell. As you can see here, the list, you can take a look at this, but not just tickets, but we see you're also trying to sell promotions, you're trying to sell game day programs, you're trying to sell obviously signage, having a certain company's sign displayed in your building, you're trying to sell ads on TV and radio. So selling in sport is a lot more broad than simply ticket sales. So what type of sales approaches do we use in sport? I think some of these might be a little bit, I don't want to say outdated, but maybe not used as much anymore now that we have social media. But I am going to I am going to touch on the 5 different ones that are discussed in the textbook and kind of use your own common sense when we're discussing these because you can probably see how some are probably a little more applicable in today's world than others. So the first one is called direct database sport marketing and sales. What does this mean? It means that you are using a database provided by the organization to sell things. And in order to create this database, you have to collect information on current consumers, past consumers, and consumers that maybe might become attendees in the future. So, or not just attendees, I guess, purchasers in the future. So, as you can see here on this list, these are different sources for getting this ticket database or this database created. Obviously, you're going to get information for your season ticket holders, but you're also going to have some walk-ups on the day of the game. You're also going to have electronic media opt-ins, as in click this link if you'd like to be signed up for emails from our company, so forth. You're obviously going to have some phone sales, corporate groups having, a bigger business, having, sometimes certain teams. I think especially at the, not the D1 Power 5 level, but D2 teams, D3 teams, NAIA sport organizations might have a local bank night and try to get all the bank employees to come to the game. Or a Boy Scout night or a Girl Scout night. So these groups that you're trying to create a database for so you can have data on them to market to them. So the first one is right through that database. So you're going to use that database that you have to try to sell something to those people. The second one is telemarketing. This is often referred to as inside sales. Telemarketing, I don't know if any of you have ever participated in a form of telemarketing. I know I have. I actually had to do, for a class, I had to do some community service hours. So there was a local political campaign in my hometown, and I thought, oh, this would be fun and easy way to get the hours, right? So I participated in telemarketing for this political political party. And in my case, I wasn't trying to sell a product. I was trying to get votes from people for the person I was representing, right? So when you're participating in telemarketing as a seller, it's very well planned out. You are given a script. You might not stick to the script the entire time, but it is planned out so you know what to say depending on what is said to you. Telemarketing can have kind of 2 different angles. The first one is sitting by the phone and waiting for people to call who are maybe inquiring or asking about a question in response to another source. So maybe they'll see an ad on TV that says, call this number to get your season tickets to the KU football season. So then you have people sitting in an office to answer these calls and get people signed up for tickets. Then, of course, we have these cold calls, these outward-oriented calls where you are calling prospective customers, you're following up leads that, maybe your database, the data you run says, call this group of people. They seem to be likely to buy tickets. And again, like I said, this is very scripted. If you've ever participated in cold calling, it's very awkward. I wouldn't say it's fun, and the odds of it working out compared to some of the other marketing techniques are not as great. So a third element of selling is direct mail, or a third approach. Direct mail is very targeted to a certain group of consumer. And this group of consumer is measurable, meaning you can determine how many sales you had based on this direct mail. They have to be reachable, right? You have to have an address for them. And it has to be a sizable portion so that you're actually making money off of this, right? If you're going to directly mail something to 5 million people, the odds of you actually making money on that might not be so good. So you kind of try to segment your consumers, a word we've talked about earlier in the semester, into groups so that direct mail is beneficial. Oftentimes it's personalized. Most of the time it has the person who's receiving the mail's name and address on it, right? Once in a while we'll see something that's like, um, excuse me, um, or so submitted to current resident at this address. But if you want direct mail to work, you probably need to personalize it. Obviously, it's measurable. We can measure how effective it was depending on how well of a response we receive. It's testable because we can test it against other direct mailers that we send out. Maybe this certain size or shape or format works better than this size or shape or format. Maybe the prices on one mailer worked out better than having higher prices on another. And then finally, it's flexible. The excuse me, the color, you can with direct mailers, you can change the color, size, the timing, when you're going to send them, the shape, and then the format. So similar to direct mailing nowadays, we have email marketing. Again, many of the principles we just talked about can be applied to email marketing, but email and mobile marketing, so using social media platforms and email, we'll kind of loop this all together in email marketing, can be precisely targeted, and oftentimes you can show a great ROI, return on investment. Now, why is that? It usually doesn't cost too much to send out an email, right? Um, Sending out emails is cheap. You can send millions and it doesn't cost you a penny. So email marketing, and I guess in this case we'll also throw in social media marketing, typically is a nice way in sport to market your product. Now this is just kind of continued information about the direct and email and social media marketing that we just talked about. A lot of times you can use this kind of, especially the direct and the email marketing, you can use this for more than just soliciting a product. You can use this to build relationships with customers. You can use it as a regular method of communication to keep the customer informed. You can ask for feedback or questionnaires. You can send thank yous. If someone purchases a season ticket package, you have their address, you can send them a thank you. Those things go a long way in any kind of sales industry. And finally, people love being invited to special events. When they think they are being invited to something that not everyone's invited to, human nature, very typical to be jealous. Jealousy is just part of human nature. So if you see your neighbor gets a cool mailer to be invited to a KU men's basketball VIP night and you didn't get it, that'll create this sense of jealousy where you want to get that as well. So these special invitation type thing, which you can do through direct or email marketing, really go a long way. And then the fifth and final type of marketing or sales approach, sorry, not marketing, sales, is personal selling. Obviously, this is face-to-face selling, and this is really something where in order to be effective, there are certain things you need to follow. Not only the stuff we talked about earlier, the traits, but there are certain little things that can really make you a better personal seller. Now, again, personal selling is face-to-face. It means you're standing in front of a person trying to sell a product. Ultimately, listening is very important. You want to really build strength, communicate the strengths of your product when you're talking to them face to face. You want to make sure you're matching consumers with an appropriate product. If you live in, what's a good example? If you're trying to sell tickets to a professional football game in the middle of, in the middle of Europe, it might not go so well because obviously American football isn't very popular in Europe. So you really want to match your consumer with the appropriate product. And you just want to be straight up when you meet with them. You want to let them know that you're selling something. Otherwise, they might think, you might come across as disingenuous. So you can read through that little list there of things that are important for personal selling. So this slide goes into a bit more detail about that. With personal selling, a big aspect is this idea of relationship marketing. You really want to create a long-term relationship with your customer. It shouldn't just be a transactional, you buy what I'm selling and I'll never talk to you again. You want to build that long-term relationship. Benefit selling is really popular in sport, especially because we're trying to sell a product where we can't predict what's going to happen on the field or the court. So you kind of try to create these benefits that might offset existing perceptions or assume negatives related to the sport product. And I think a perfect example of this is KU football. How now we see even though we haven't had a good team in the last many years, we're trying to really benefit sell our new coach and this new culture we're building. Interestingly enough, personal selling can be most effective when you couple it with sampling, trial usage, and open houses. Those kind of things are really big for getting the most out of personal selling. And in sports, you see this a lot where it's like, come down to Allen Fieldhouse. We're opening it to the public to check out the arena, maybe get to meet the players, that kind of thing. Of course, we don't usually do that with our men's basketball team, but you might see a lot of other schools do that with their sporting teams. So, sorry, that was a lot of information. But now moving into innovative selling strategies. How are some things that can set your selling apart from what other people are selling? Well, I think in sport, one of the biggest is remember your packaging. That's something we see a lot. People like to, if you're selling tickets, for instance, people like to get the cool packages with, or the cool ticket packages with the cool images on that. Even if you think of selling a shoe, a cool shoe box or a cool letter that comes in your shoe box that says, thanks for purchasing from our company. Those kind of things go a long way. And then as you can read through the others, but couponing, you can use coupons in sport. People love to save money, right? So couponing, that's kind of a broad term, but discounted sales, kind of a big deal. And then especially the profitability and the effect of group sales, making sure you're taking group sales into account. So just a couple more slides here. Pricing and value, two things that are associated with selling. Pricing is an important mix in the important element of the marketing mix. Because pricing can be readily changed. You can easily change the price of your single game basketball tickets depending on how the season is going. Sometimes price is one of the most effective tools. If you sell your tickets for really low, you can often increase attendance really quickly. Price is highly visible. It's something that anytime you're buying something, the first thing you're usually considering is how much is this going to cost me? And it's never far from the consumer's mind. Like same thing I just said. You're always wondering what it's going to cost you. Now, value is a quantitative measure of the worth of the product. So again, value is a number figure. How much is this worth? And so ultimately, this kind of equation is really important. Satisfaction, so customer satisfaction, is the benefit they are receiving minus the cost they paid. So I know we've talked about this before, but if you go to a restaurant and you pay for, I don't know, you order a $40 entree and the food is okay, the atmosphere is okay, but the service is horrible, then your benefit of that is probably not worth the cost. So your satisfaction is going to be low. So keep that equation in mind. Ultimately, price does not equal cost. What does this mean? Your ticket to a Chiefs football game may cost you $125, but that is not the price of the entire expense, right? You've got to consider your travel there, your parking and transportation, your concessions, your souvenirs, all those good things. So it's important to remember that when you hear price and you hear cost, those are not the same thing. Another aspect of selling and price is the secondary market. The secondary market is essentially where you go to buy tickets for an event when you're not buying them from the team or from the institution's website. Typically, in the secondary market, the prices might kind of vary. You might see all sorts of uh, prices. Typically, they might be less than what the team is selling them. And some season ticket holders go on there, or buyers, they might sell their tickets on there because they can make money. And this can be kind of a big decision when you're trying to buy tickets in the first place. You want to support your school, but you can save $20 by going on to StubHub or onto a different ticketing type website in the secondary market. So be familiar with what the secondary market is and know some examples. I'm trying to Ticketmaster, StubHub. I'm sure many of you have maybe used these websites for concert tickets or sporting event tickets. And then we have this concept of aftermarketing. Aftermarketing is building a relationship with your, or maintaining a relationship with your customer after the sale has been completed. So now that they're a customer, you should not forget about them, right? You want to participate in aftermarketing. Because the more valuable the customer is, the more effort the staff might have to put into that. But ultimately, aftermarketing to a current customer or to a customer who's been around for a long time is more important than the cost of retaining current customers. So while it may cost a lot to retain current customers, aftermarketing is really important because it kind of alleviates those costs, I guess, in a way to say it. So how do you keep customers around for the long term? Well, you need to offer them benefits that meet their needs. And I think you could use any example. If you go to a KU basketball game and you meet those people who've come year after year after year, to retain these customers, you have to participate in this idea of friendly customer service. So what kind of customer service and retention plans are there? Again, you can read through these slides on your own, but essentially kind of making these customers feel special. Often offering a frequency, incentive programs, giving them personalized customer contact and treatment. Let me see, do I have one more? Yeah. And when I see this customer service and retention plan, what I think of is this idea of, I might buy something from the clothing store Gap. And they make me sign up with my email, all this stuff. And now I get emails from them all the time. Thank you for coming into Gap. Gap has a 50% sale off this week. Just a bunch of different things and different forms of communication that really are important to this idea of customer service and keeping me around. Ultimately, I get annoyed with that stuff and I unsubscribe, but theoretically, those things are important when keeping customers around. Let's see here. Especially in sport, how can you do this? Providing special access to players and organizational assets is probably one of the best ways. Let's say you create special members-only events. I know KU basketball does this with their donors, right? The donors, the high donors, they are able to travel with the team on a private jet or on a jet or a chartered flight when the team goes somewhere. And so those kind of incentives, obviously that's offered to the highest donors, but those kind of things are really important to those donors. Or getting to have dinner with Coach Self, or getting to meet the players when no one else gets to meet them, or something like that. Those things are important for these customers and it keeps them around. And I believe this is my last slide. Sorry, I'm getting a little long-winded here, but customer lifetime value. What does that mean? Well, it's a formula which helps a marketing manager kind of come to this monetary value that's associated with the long-term relationship of the customer. Now, this formula reveals the cost of having the customer as well as the net worth of the relationship over time. So here you see an example. A season ticket holder shouldn't be viewed as $4,000 that we get per year because they pay $4,000 a year for their season tickets. But when we sign up a season ticket holder, we need to think, wow, they might be here for 20 years, so they might be worth $80,000. And so that's kind of a formula you might apply when you are moving back here when you're trying to implement these customer service and retention plans. Now, I think that's all I have for this lecture. Very long. Sorry, I didn't want to do this, but since we didn't have class Tuesday or today, I wanted to kind of get through all that. Again, I will be working on your study guide and your exam, and I will get that posted hopefully by Sunday. And then on Tuesday, we will review all of these topics so you're prepared for the exam.